I was sitting alone in my small apartment, ready to celebrate New Year's Eve. I loved my independence. It was just me, my art supplies, and a few glasses of wine. I figured I'd spend the night creating something new. I thought it would be a peaceful night, but then things took a turn. As I got my supplies out, I started to hear a faint melody. It drifted through the thin walls. At first I thought it was just some neighbors having a party, but there was something about that melody. It felt strange and unsettling. I tried to ignore it, but it grew louder, wrapping around my thoughts like a cold hand. I decided to look out the window, hoping to see what was making that noise. I peered outside, but nothing was there. Just a quiet street. I shrugged it off and went back to my work. The hours passed, but the music kept pulsing through my apartment. It was haunting, almost like a sad song. I felt my heart racing. To drown it out, I turned on my own music. But it didn't help. The sound grew and twisted into whispers. They seemed to echo my own thoughts, making me feel dizzy. Around 11:30, I took another quick glance outside. That was when I saw them. Shadowy figures moved outside my window. They flickered in and out, almost like they were playing a game of hide and seek. I felt chills run over my arms. I stepped closer to the glass, trying to see better, but they vanished the moment I looked. I wondered if I was losing my mind. My hands started to shake as I pulled back. Midnight was drawing near and the air around me felt heavier. The music demanded attention, almost like it wanted something from me. I thought about leaving my apartment, going to find my neighbors, but something stopped me. It was like I was trapped inside. I paced back and forth, the shadows gnawing at the edges of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I looked away again, they'd come back. Then, just as the clock struck 12, the music stopped suddenly. I felt a cold silence fill the room. I turned back to the window. Everything froze. I thought I heard a whisper then. It was faint, but deep. I felt goosebumps crawl down my spine. I asked out loud, "What do you want?" It felt silly, really, but in that quiet moment I was grasping at straws. No answer came back. Only silence. I felt panic rise up within me. My heart raced faster. What was happening? Did I drink too much? Was I dreaming? The night felt endless, full of uncertainty. I was on the edge, waiting for something that may never come. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I wanted to run, to hide, but I was glued to that spot. As I stood there, I sensed something in the air. I just didn't know what. How was this happening? What were those shadows? The questions twisted in my mind. I was on the brink of discovering something I never wanted to find. I stood frozen for what felt like hours, waiting for some sign of movement, but the stillness stretched on. Just as I thought the moment was finally past, a soft knock echoed from my front door. My heart skipped a beat and I felt the blood rush to my face. The last thing I expected was someone at my door, much less at this hour. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling as it bounced off the walls. No response came. I shifted my weight, debating whether I should open it. The shadows outside were already creeping back into my mind. I told myself it was probably just someone who miscalculated their party stop, but it didn't soothe my nerves. I took a deep breath and approached the door. The sound of the wind rattling against the window was louder than the lingering whisper in my mind. I peered through the peephole, my heart pounding. My neighbor, Mrs. Dalton, stood there, her gray hair disheveled. I almost sighed in relief, but I hesitated. She looked different. Her eyes seemed wide and unfocused. "Honey, open the door," she said urgently, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. You need to let me in." I unlocked the door, cautiously pulling it open just enough for her to slip through. "What's going on?" I whispered, feeling both concern and confusion. Mrs. Dalton leaned against the wall, glancing back towards the hallway as if something was following her. "You heard it, didn't you? The music?" "Yes, but I thought—" My voice trailed off. I had no idea how to explain it all. She cut me off. "It's not safe out there, trust me, they're here just like they were last year, they come every New Year's Eve." Her hands trembled, and for the first time, I saw fear etched in her usually calm expression. "What do you mean? Who's here?" I asked, panic rising again. "The shadows. They feed off the energy of people celebrating. They'll take what they want if you're not careful. She grabbed my arm and I felt cold creep into my bones. You can't let them get to you. Don't listen to the whispers. Don't look outside. Before I could respond, the music resumed. It was sharper now, like a knife cutting through the tension in the room. It surged through my apartment, drowning out my thoughts, filling the silence with chaos. Don't! Mrs. Dalton shouted, pulling me back as I moved instinctively toward the window. It knows you're listening! But it was too late. The whispers cradled my mind, filling me with a sense of urgency I couldn't shake. I wanted to understand. I needed to look. Suddenly the lights flickered. The shadows outside swarmed closer, their forms beginning to take shape. I felt trapped. Mrs. Dalton clawed at my arm, pulling me away as panic surged through her. Then everything went dark. The strength in her grip vanished as the world around me dimmed. And in that darkness, the whispers grew louder, shaping into words I almost understood. I could only hope I'd survive whatever came next. The darkness pressed in on all sides. I felt my pulse quicken as I reached out, desperate to find something familiar in the void. My heart thudded in my chest, racing with the fear that I might never find my way back to the light. Mrs. Dalton? I called out, hoping to hear her voice, to know I wasn't alone. But the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. I swallowed hard, straining to make out shapes or sounds, anything that provided a sign I wasn't trapped in a nightmare. Just then, a faint glow flickered back to life. The dim light barely broke through the heavy shadows, but it was something. I squinted, my eyes adjusting. To my right, I saw Mrs. Dalton huddled against the wall, her expression pale, her brow glistening with sweat. I can't see them, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I can feel them. We have to. Suddenly the whispers returned, flooding my mind with a cacophony of voices. They drifted through the air like leaves caught in a tempest. Something was coming. Something I couldn't quite understand, yet it filled me with an instinctual dread. Do you hear that? I asked, my voice shaking. Mrs. Dalton nodded. The shadows are hungry. They want us to celebrate, to draw us out. You've got to resist. Don't let them in. With every word, the music rose again, drumming its chaotic beat, wrapping its sinister fingers around my thoughts. I pressed my hands against my ears, trying to drown it out, but it only intensified, ringing in my head like a relentless hammer. Look! Mrs. Dalton shouted, pointing toward the window. I followed her gaze and felt my breath catch in my throat. Outside, a dim procession could be seen. Figures in shadowed outlines danced in the street, their limbs contorting unnaturally as they twirled and spun. Laughter echoed, a haunting melody mingled with the chime of party bells. They were celebrating. Don't look too long, Mrs. Dalton urged, pulling me back. They'll try to lure you. But something inside me compelled me to watch. I felt drawn in like a moth to a flame. Just then, the lights flickered again, casting an eerie glow across the room. For a moment, the shadows seemed to stabilize, revealing more concrete forms. As they approached the windows, I could see their faces, hollowed eyes, twisted grins that oozed a horrifying joy. Each time they laughed, I felt it resonate deep within me, an echo of my own fear and confusion. That was when I saw it. One of them, a figure dressed in garish colors, leaned closer to my window, its eyes locking onto mine. My chest tightened. I felt as if it could see right through me, reading my very soul. Don't let it get to you, Mrs. Dalton shouted again, shaking me. Look away, please. Way. With a jolt, I tore my eyes from the creature. But in doing so, I stumbled back, hitting the table hard. The lamp wobbled dangerously before crashing to the floor, sending a shudder through the room. Get down! Mrs. Dalton yelled, and we both dropped to the ground as the whispers swelled louder now, drowning out everything else. And then came a different sound, a thud, followed by a chill that crept up my spine. Someone was in the house. I held my breath. The thud echoed again, a dull thump that seemed to come from the hallway. My heart raced, each beat pounding in my ears. The whispers had faded, but the feeling of something lurking nearby was inescapable. "Stay close," Mrs. Dalton whispered, her eyes wide. "We need to be quiet." I nodded, though my mouth felt dry. We pressed ourselves against the wall, shadows clinging to us like unwanted memories. I strained to hear more, but all I could manage was the sound of my own breathing. It felt too loud, too raw. Then came another thud, this time followed by a soft, dragging sound. I felt a spike of panic. What was out there? My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. "Do you think it's the shadows?" I murmured. The thought made my palms sweat. Mrs. Dalton shook her head vigorously. "No, this is different. They're not supposed to come here." Before I could respond, the dragging sound grew closer. I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye, a dark figure sliding along the floor, inching toward us. It looked like a shadow come to life, wavering and twisting. I couldn't breathe. "What do we do?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking the tension in the air. "Just stay still," she said, her voice steady despite her wide eyes. "They might not see us if we don't move." The figure stopped an arm's length from us. It longed in the dim light, shifting in a way that seemed almost curious. My stomach churned as I watched it, a sense of reality slipping further away. It looked like a person, but wasn't a person. I could see its outline pulsating, the shadows bleeding into each other. When I dared to blink, I saw the figure shift again, but this time its form changed. Laughter erupted, hollow and cold. As if in response nearby, I heard the muffled sound of a bell ringing. It was clear yet distorted, calling out to something deep inside me. "Don't listen," Mrs. Dalton hissed, her voice urgent. I tried to focus on her, but my gaze was drawn back to the shadow. It seemed to stretch and twist, getting clearer. And then, right in front of me, I realized it had a face, or what could be called one. A pair of gleaming eyes stared back, surrounded by a mouth that curved too far upwards, forming a grotesque grin. The pressure in the room escalated. I felt as if the air itself was thickening, curiosity clawing at me even as fear threatened to crush me. Suddenly, a loud crash from the other room jolted me. I turned, heart in my throat. Whatever was out there, it was getting closer. Then everything went dark. The flickering light above us faded completely, leaving us in pitch-black silence. I could hear my heartbeat loud and frantic in my chest. "It's here," I whispered, barely managing to speak. "Don't move," Mrs. Dalton hissed. But wouldn't it notice us, hear our hearts racing? And then I heard it. I felt it, really. A cold breath on my neck. I turned slowly, feigning courage, and met a single eye staring back at me in the void. The eye was impossibly still, staring right through me. I felt like a fish caught in a net, helpless and exposed. My breath hitched, and instinctively I took a half step back. "Don't move." Mrs. Dalton's whisper was barely audible, but I could sense the urgency in her tone. I forced myself to breathe slowly, even as the lump in my throat grew. The eye blinked. One slow, deliberate blink that sent a wave of panic washing over me. It wasn't just watching, it was understanding me. I stood frozen, unable to look away. In that moment, everything else faded. The darkness, the shadow, the dragging sound from earlier. All I could see was that single eye. Then it shifted, and suddenly the rest of the dark figure emerged. Long, spindly limbs reached towards me, fingers elongating, seeming to stretch further than humanly possible. I could hardly contain my scream, but something seemed to slam my mouth shut. A deep, dull chime echoed in my mind, drowning out my thoughts. "Close your eyes!" Mrs. Dalton shouted. "Now!" I obeyed instinctively, my eyes squeezing shut as I pressed my back against the wall, feeling the rough texture against my skin. I imagined closing myself into a tiny box, hoping that if I couldn't see it, it wouldn't see me either. Seconds became minutes. I was aware of Mrs. Dalton breathing beside me, the sound steady and reassuring. But then it faltered, and I could sense her fear. "Please, please, please," she muttered. I felt a shift in the air, a change that made my stomach turn. The cold breath was gone, but a pressure built against my chest. I fought against the urge to open my eyes and peek. Then I heard it again, the dragging sound, closer than before. My heart raced as the darkness seemed to thicken. Without warning, the bell rang out again, louder and clearer, like a distorted alarm. I opened my eyes just a crack. The shape was gone. The hallway was empty, the shadows swirling as if mocking our fear. "Do you see it?" I whispered, sounding ridiculous even to myself. Mrs. Dalton shook her head, looking lost. "It's gone, but it won't be far." Before I could process her words, the lights flickered back on. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. The hallway appeared just like it had before, plain, unassuming, even comforting in its familiarity. But a shiver raced down my spine. "Was it real?" I asked, my throat dry. Mrs. Dalton's eyes widened as she scanned the corridor. It was real enough. And then we both noticed something. A small, drawn-out shadow appeared at the far end of the hallway, standing still. It stretched unnaturally, twisting to the contours of the walls. "Run," she said, tensing as her hands grasped mine. Before I could answer, we took off, sprinting down the hallway away from the shadow that followed, an echo of our every frantic step. Panic filled every part of me, pulling me along. But I couldn't shake the feeling of those eyes on us. Just as we turned a corner, I clipped my foot against something solid, a small table. I tumbled to the ground, my hands crashing against the hard floor. That's when I saw it. A small black bell, lying there, covered in dust. I remembered its sound ringing in my head. My heart raced again, the implication sinking in. Someone, or something, had been here before us. "What is it?" Mrs. Dalton urged, but I was already reaching for it. As I picked it up, a chilling laugh echoed down the hallway, and I knew that whatever had waited had returned. I froze. The bell clutched tightly in my hand. That laugh sent an electric shock through my body, and I could feel every hair on my neck stand on end. It was sharp, low, and filled with the kind of malice that made my skin crawl. "Did you hear that?" Mrs. Dalton whispered, her grip on my arm tightening. "Yeah," I managed to reply, my voice barely a breath. The sense of dread was thick, nearly suffocating. In my peripheral vision, I could see the shadow moving again. It wasn't just a silhouette now. It flickered in and out, like a bad signal on an old TV. And it was getting closer. "It's coming for us." I said it more to reassure myself than anything else. Mrs. Dalton's eyes darted wildly. "We need to find a way out. Now." We stumbled backward, searching for any sign of escape. The light flickered again, briefly revealing the twisted face of the figure that had haunted us moments ago. It paused, eyeing us with that same all-seeing gaze. But then it morphed back into shadow, vanishing just as quickly as it appeared. "Where?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. I was losing my grip on sanity. "In the supply closet, I think. It could lead us to the back exit." She pointed toward a door behind us that I hadn't even noticed. As we turned, that laughing voice echoed again, but it was accompanied now by a whispered chant, like a litany of lost souls. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel them washing over me like a dark wave. With determination, I rushed toward the door, dragging Mrs. Dalton along. "Hurry, before it finds us." She scrambled behind me, barely keeping pace. Each step felt heavier, like I was wading through syrup. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, drawing me back with its weight. I reached the supply closet door and yanked it open. Inside, darkness swallowed us whole, and I hesitated, the bell still clutched in my fist. What if we stepped into a trap? "Just go," Mrs. Dalton urged, her voice tremulous but forceful. I reluctantly stepped inside, the air thickening around us. The doorway behind us slammed shut with a thunderous bang, and I felt my heart race. Did it follow us?" I whispered, desperate to hear a sign of security. But instead, the shadows danced around us, whispering in that sinister chant again. I squinted, trying to see something, anything to cling to, but the darkness was oppressive, "Find the light switch," I shouted, fumbling in the dark until I collided with a rickety shelf. I felt a wave of something cold brush past my cheek, and I instinctively ducked. Suddenly, the bell in my hand vibrated. It was subtle at first, but then it intensified, thrumming against my palm as if aware of the darkness surrounding us. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Dalton's voice cut through the chaos, almost frantic. I held the bell out as if it were a weapon. The vibrations turned into a steady chime, and as I rang it, the darkness recoiled slightly, revealing flickers of light. "Keep ringing it," she shouted, the fear in her voice pushing me forward. With every chime, the air shifted and the shadows seemed to weaken. But the laughter didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder, and I knew whatever was lurking out there was not done with us yet. As the last dark corners darted away, a figure surged forward, breaking through the shadows, and with it came the chilling realization that this was only the beginning of something far worse. The bell rang again, cutting through the dark like a knife. I kept my grip tight, already feeling the weight of fear settle deep in my gut. Mrs. Dalton pressed closer to me, her breath quick and uneven beside me. "Do you think it's gone?" she whispered, glancing nervously around the cramped space. I couldn't answer. Instead, I focused on the dim flickers of light that danced across the walls like stars caught in a storm. Each chime pushed back the darkness, but I could still sense it looming just outside our reach. The laughter, that terrible laughter, echoed in the distance, a taunting reminder that we weren't safe. Not yet. We needed a plan. "There has to be a window or something in here," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I started groping along the walls, my fingertips brushing against cold metal and dusty shelves. I searched blindly, but all I found were cobwebs and clutter. Then I felt something warm and odd beneath my fingers. I pulled it down and my heart dropped as I turned it over. It was an old lantern, thick with grime and barely holding together. "Mrs. Dalton, look." I held it up, excitement mingling with apprehension. She stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Can you light it?" "I'll try." My hands shook as I rummaged in my pocket for the matches I kept stashed for emergencies. I fumbled the first few, dropping them in a clumsy pile at my feet. The shadows closed in tighter as I finally struck one against the box. The flame flickered to life, and I held it to the lantern's wick. Slowly the lantern flared up, illuminating the closet with a warm, soft glow. For a moment, the world outside felt far away, but then, as if on cue, the laughter morphed into something deeper, more insidious. It turned into screams, cries of terror that seemed to seep into my bones. "What is that?" My voice wavered. Mrs. Dalton's face went pale in the light. "It sounds like it's in pain. Or enjoying it," I whispered. I glanced at the door, half expecting it to burst open. Whatever was out there, it was not done with us. Shadows crawled across the ceiling, whispering promises of dread. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "We can't stay here. We need to find a way out. The light will keep it at bay. For now." "There's got to be a back exit somewhere in here," she urged, the edge of panic in her voice pushing me to act. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. The lantern cast shadows around the closet, highlighting the chaos inside. I noticed a faint outline of a door at the far end. "We can check that," I pointed. As we moved closer, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Something was different. The laughter had silenced. A chilling silence took its place, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. With every step, the air thickened with an unseen pressure that made it hard to breathe. Then, without warning, a loud bang erupted from the door we were headed toward. It rattled on its hinges, sending me stumbling backward. "Get back!" Mrs. Dalton shouted, her voice slicing through the silence. My heart raced as I steadied myself, knowing we were running out of time. I glanced at her, adrenaline surging through me. "What do we do?" But before she could answer, the door flung open, revealing a darker presence than I'd ever imagined. My breath caught in my throat, and I realized that we had awakened something far more sinister than we had anticipated. As the figure stepped into the light, it became clear that whatever had trapped us was only just beginning to show its true face. The figure stood there, cloaked in darkness, only partially illuminated by the lantern's feeble light. I squinted, trying to make out its features, but the shadows clung to it, twisting and folding like tattered fabric. "What do you want?" I barely managed to whisper, my throat tight with fear. The figure took a step forward, and I noticed a glint of something sharp in its hand. My pulse quickened. "Get back!" I yelled, instinctively grabbing Mrs. Dalton's shoulder and pulling her behind me. But she wasn't moving. I turned to look at her, only to see her frozen in place, eyes wide and glassy, transfixed by the figure before us. "Mrs. Dalton, come on," I urged, my voice shaky. As if breaking a spell, she blinked, her gaze shifting toward me. It's not a person," she stammered, her voice trembling. "It's something else." That thought made my skin crawl. I had to act. "We need to find that back exit. Now." I turned back to the door, my mind racing for any way out of this nightmare. The figure's laughter erupted again, a low, rumbling cackle echoing off the walls. Instinctively I stepped back, but there was nowhere to go. Panic threatened to swallow me whole as I felt the weight of the darkness pressing around us. Mrs. Dalton grabbed my arm, her eyes darting between the figure and the faint outline of the other door. "This way." We pushed past each other, moving toward where the door had swung open. My heart thudded in my chest as we rushed past the figure, which stood motionless but watching, waiting. I flung myself against the door handle, twisting it with all my strength. It felt like it was stuck, frozen in place. Desperate, I slammed my body against it while Mrs. Dalton screamed beside me. Then it opened, letting in a gust of cold, stale air. I stumbled through, dragging her with me. But what lay beyond sent chills through my veins. It wasn't another room. It was a hallway shrouded in darkness, stretching endlessly. Without thinking, we bolted down the corridor, the light from the lantern our only beacon. The laughter grew louder, echoing down the hall. But a new sound joined it, a whispering voice that seemed to slither along the walls. "Come back. Come play." It taunted, coiling around us as we pressed on, legs moving faster than I thought possible. Just as I thought we might be able to escape, I caught a glimpse of something on the walls. Memories? Pictures? They were hanging there, framed in shadows, faces contorted in terror. My breath quickened, and I stumbled again but managed to keep my footing. "There's no way out," Mrs. Dalton gasped, her voice strained. "We're trapped." I shook my head, the panic edging back in. "We can't let it catch us, keep moving." But just as we pushed deeper into the hallway, everything went dark. The lantern flickered once, then died, leaving us in a suffocating void. I reached blindly for Mrs. Dalton, but my hand found only air. Panic surged through me, and I called out, "Mrs. Dalton!" Silence answered back, the kind that made each heartbeat feel like thunder. Then just ahead I saw a flicker, a dim glow. But something in the air felt wrong, a tension that tightened my throat. As I moved toward the light, dread settled in. That whispering voice again, softer this time. "You're almost here." I hesitated, heart racing. It sounded like a beckoning, a trap. I had to decide, then and there, if I was going to follow it. I took a deep breath, wrestling with the urge to flee. The light flickered again, more pronounced this time. My gut told me to be cautious, but the whisper danced around me, urging me forward. "Stay close," I whispered, though I was all alone now. Hope drained from me like water slipping through my fingers. I edged toward the light, each step heavy with uncertainty. Suddenly the glow intensified. The walls morphed into a swirling mist, revealing more framed images emerging from the shadows. They were even closer than before. Faces of sorrow, mouths open in silent screams. My stomach churned. Each image seemed to pulse with energy, as if they were trapped in some kind of agony. I was losing my mind. This couldn't be real. I turned to retreat, but behind me the darkness stirred. A breath caught in my throat as a faint rustle sounded from the shadows. I felt something shift in the air, like unseen eyes scrutinizing my every move. "Mrs. Dalton?" My voice was barely above a whisper, panic seeping back in. "Is that you?" No response came. just the haunting whispers that crept closer, wrapping around me like tendrils of smoke. Before I could think of my next move, a door appeared to my right, silhouetted against the glow. It looked like an old wooden door, worn and cracked. A faint sound of something scuttling behind it made me pause. What if it leads to freedom? I thought. But the whispers grew louder, as if warning me to stay away. Then, just as my hand grazed the handle, I heard that taunting voice again. Why don't you join us? You'll never leave. I froze, blood turning to ice in my veins. The shadows thickened and darkened, and I felt a heavy weight descend behind me. Something was very wrong. Before I could react, the door swung open, revealing another corridor just like this one, infected with shadows, twisted with the same terror that had engulfed me before. And standing at the threshold was not Mrs. Dalton, but the figure from before. I stumbled backward, dread washing over me as I met its gaze. It was no longer obscured. An uncanny grin stretched across its face, sharp teeth glinting in the soft light. The shadows danced around it like eager minions. I couldn't take my eyes away. Welcome, it hissed, voice dripping with mockery. Would you like to play? With an instinctive scream, I turned and ran. The hall stretched endlessly before me, and I could hear that voice echoing behind me, the laughter mingling with the whispers. I had to find a way out. But then everything shifted again. The corridor warped, and with it, a sense of urgency built. I kept running, but there was a strange pull within me, as if the shadows were alive, beckoning me to return. Suddenly I noticed a pair of familiar shoes ahead in the dim light. Mrs. Dalton, I yelled, reaching out. But as I got closer, the figure turned away, melting into the darkness. I was close, but something was off. My heart raced, and as I turned to follow her, I was met with another voice, deep and guttural, coming from the depth of the shadows. Not so fast. My breath caught, and dread flooded my senses. I faced the darkness, realizing that this was just the beginning. The shadows closed in around me, swirling and twisting, pulling at my limbs as if trying to drag me into their cold embrace. My breaths came fast and shallow, panic clawing at my throat. I could hear it again, the laughter, echoing taunts layered with grief and hunger. I turned to run, desperate for an escape. Mrs. Dalton, I shouted, but the corridor had become an endless labyrinth, every twist and turn leading me further into despair. The faint, flickering glow I had seen moments ago disappeared into the dark, replaced by the oppressive silence that followed my calls. Suddenly a chilling gust swept past me, kicking up a swirl of dust that stung my eyes. I squinted through the darkness, and there it was again, a soft melody, hauntingly familiar. It danced in the air, teasing memories of laughter and celebration from New Year's past. The urge to follow it felt almost magnetic, enticing me longer into the shadows. I forced myself to steel my heart and resist. I won't listen, I shouted defiantly, clenching the bell tightly in my palm. I won't be part of your game. That's when a small burst of light flickered in the distance. My heart leaped. I sprinted toward it, ignoring the way the whispering shadows begged me to stay. As I ran, the atmosphere shifted, darkened by the mounting urgency around me. Just as hope surged within me, I stumbled into a new space, a clearing lit by the soft glow of a moonlight filtered through slatted windows. The room was small and cluttered, much like the back of Mrs. Dalton's apartment. And yet, something wasn't right. Figures flickered in and out of the corners of my vision, their faces lost in despair, mouths forming silent cries that echoed in my mind. I covered my ears, but it was no use. The overwhelming symphony of grief drew me closer to the walls. Please let me go, I begged, my voice trembling in the stillness. The shadows began to converge on me, pooling around my feet, whisking past my legs like restless smoke. I saw a door at the far end of the room, beckoning me. I pushed through the fog of fear, forcing my legs to move. The oppressive weight of the darkness clawed at my sides, urging me to surrender. With one final push, I burst through the door and stumbled into what looked like another hallway lined with mirrors. The sight almost knocked the breath from my lungs. Reflections of despair stared back at me in fractured forms. I turned, ready to bolt, only to find the corridor extending infinitely behind me. The shadows shrieked and whispered, their frustration palpable. "Why do you resist?" An echoing voice taunted, resonant with each step I took. "You belong to us." I refused to look back, hastening my pace as I navigated past the mirrors, focusing on the exit I could feel was there, somewhere just ahead. Each breath came with a sense of urgency ripped from the grip of despair. And then I saw it, a faint light pooling at the end of the hallway, a beacon in the storm of shadows. I ran toward it, determination driving me forward. The light grew brighter as I approached, illuminating my path. But as I reached out, the walls shuddered, and another echo of that laughter rang out, this time mingling with Mrs. Dalton's vividly remembered voice. "You can't escape." I felt the pull of shadows at my back, grasping at edges of my sanity. But a surge of strength coursed through me. I grasped the bell, ringing it once more. The vibration rippled through the air. With each chime, the darkness recoiled, screams fading just enough for me to move forward. I dove toward the light and stepped through. In an instant, I emerged outside, fresh air filling my lungs. I fell to my knees in the snow-covered street, heart racing. The moonlight shone brightly above, and everything around me felt simultaneously so serene and foreign. It felt like freedom, but I couldn't shake the weight of the shadows pressing on my mind. Out of breath, I looked back at the apartment, wondering if I had really escaped. Was it all real? Had I truly shaken off the grip of whatever bound the shadows? As I stood and brushed the snow off myself, I noticed strange silence enveloping the street. Not one soul. My heart sank a little more, a question lingering in the air. I turned to walk away, an eerie instinct wedging itself into my mind, a thought that whispered just out of reach. I still hadn't seen Mrs. Dalton. Were the shadows still out there, waiting to weave their tapestry of horror? I shuffled toward my car, uncertainty threading through my gut. The night felt deeper somehow, as if the world held its breath, and just for a moment, I thought I heard laughter mingle with the wind. I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes late at night when I hear music playing from somewhere deep in the dark, I think of what happened and the choices I made. I wonder whether it was all a nightmare that wouldn't leave me, whether the shadows still roam and if they seek out others to join in their dance. But mostly I try not to think about it.